Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to MindShifters Radio with your co-host, the For-giveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie. Michael and Jeanie share with you the wisdom of the ancient Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. They offer tools and support 5 days a week from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They will support you in building a solid foundation within yourself to live in pure love. In Aramaic, Rahma. Michael is the author of Why Is This Happening to Me Again? For more information on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. And now your co-hosts, the For-giveness Doctor, Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce. And the truth that is rooted within me.
Welcome to MindShifters Radio. My name is Dr. Michael Ryce, and we're absolutely delighted to have you with us. And we are celebrating once again Memorial Day, and our Memorial Day celebration is all about honoring those who've gone before us, those who have been injured, maimed, damaged, harmed, been murdered, been forced to murder in war their fellow men, and brought those traumas home for those who survived to their families. And so our process here is one of, how do we eliminate war? How do we actually get out of this war game? And the way we're going to do it is when each individual stops the game of blaming everybody else for what's going on in their lives and actually has responsibility in themselves for what they're doing, for what takes place within themselves. And so we are here to support you in that process of forgiveness. If you're not familiar with the forgiveness process, we invite you to go to our website, www.whyagain.com. That is www.whyagain.com. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a link that says Download Worksheets. The first four shows in that, the first four links in that section will give you the how-to of forgiveness, the worksheet itself, and 2 radio shows where we did live worksheets with people, guiding them through the process, and they're both absolutely awesome, the first one especially. So please join us, and we're delighted that you're here. Jeanie, are you on the air with us? Hello, Jeanie. Well, I'm not sure. It looks like you're in the chat room or in the phone queue, but maybe we've got some technical difficulties. Dr. Tim, are you there? Okay, well, not sure. There we are. I've got Dr. Tim cranked on. Are you with us, Dr. Tim?
I am. Are you there?
Oh, cool. I'm here. I can hear you loud and clear. I don't know whether Jeannie's, it looks like she's on the phone, but she doesn't seem to be coming through. Let's see if Jeannie's there. Are you there, Jeanie?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you, yes.
I don't know if it's because you're on the switchboard that it won't let me on. I'm having to refresh and see. For some reason, it's not letting me on.
Okay, I'll log off. When I called in and I couldn't reach you, and I didn't hear any response, I thought, well, maybe you hadn't made it. So I'll just go ahead and log off, and if you want to go ahead and log on, then it'll be all yours. I'll leave it to you.
All right.
What technology game? Okay, I just hit the log off button, so it should just take a second for you to be able to get back on. And Dr. Tim, how are you this morning?
Doing quite well, thank you.
Or this afternoon?
Yep, we're staying quite busy and kind of in the afterglow of the whole week of intensive workshops, and still getting wonderful comments from people about the Saturday. As you know, somebody in the Still Point Breathing Works shop on Saturday at the end of it said, okay, let's reschedule to do this again in 6 months. Everybody come back and meet up.
Right.
So So
we'll see what.
Yeah, it was very intense, and I heard you had a nice group last night for another Y workshop.
We did. We didn't finalize it until about 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and at 7 o'clock we did a Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop. It was a small group, but very intense. 3 or 4 people came down from the Carey group, which was awesome, and then we had 4 or 5 people from the Science of Spirituality group here in Naperville, and we're looking at creating another series, perhaps starting on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we'll just see kind of what shows up in the way of a facility to do it, and how it all unfolds.
That would be in Naperville again?
It would be in Naperville or the Naperville area, yes. So we're working on that as we speak. So is there anything in particular that anybody from last week's series, for those who haven't been listening to the show, we did 6 days of workshops, actually 7 days, I guess, last week, and very intense time with a group of folks in Cary, Illinois. It was awesome.
Well, we had all kinds of responses from people, everything from there's so much energy shifting that they're having physical responses to tremendous emotional breakthroughs. And, of course, there were a number of people who went to the Still Point Breathing workshop who had been at almost every workshop throughout the week. So it certainly stirred up a lot of stuff for them. To be in the workshops during the week, and then cleared out a lot of stuff on the Still Point Breathing. And,
yeah, it was very sweet energy.
And people were just thrilled with the process. And as you know, there were some people there who had done other breathing techniques in the past, and they commented about the benefit of Still Point, how powerful yet how gentle it was. So it was a very, very intense time. Of course, as you know, hosting the workshops with you and working all week long was a very, very intense week. So I had a kind of a letdown healing crisis on Sunday, and that seems to have gone pretty well. It was a whole day where I was basically forced to just lay down and take care of myself and breathe and drink some good fluids and nothing else all day.
Well, certainly that's right on track for the system to start to open up and go through its eliminative process. It's probably one of the biggest pieces missing from the puzzle of healing in our culture is, people say, well, I had to go to the doctor and do this, and then I had to go and rush off to work and get my job done. And, like we're human doings, and those who take no time for the space of being and no time for the process of healing end up frustrating and shutting down that healing process. So, busyness being a drug. So I acknowledge you for being able and willing to take the day to yourself and just let the energy move. That's definitely key in the process.
Yeah, we did that, and just did some more Still Point breathing on Sunday, and slept and did breathing and just let it happen.
Fabulous. Well, for anybody that's in the Chicago area, we will probably be doing some more workshops starting on Thursday. I'm down around the Naperville end of town, and so if anyone is interested in joining us, keep an eye on the website. That'll be there. And Jeanie, do we have anything going on in the chat room or any callers calling in?
No, I don't, but I did get an email that I wanted to share. This was from a lady who actually ordered the MP3 of the book online, and when I sent back to her and told her that, gave her the links to it, then she wrote me back personally, and she said, thank you, the links worked. I have just discovered MindShifters Radio and this book, and it is so eye-opening. I had considered myself pretty self-aware, always working on new ways of reacting to things, but the work that you and your husband do has given me an entirely new way to see things.
The show with Lynn especially resonated with me because I've had several incidents in the past 10 years in different healthcare situations where I really felt seriously victimized. I've wondered each time, what did I do to bring this on when I feel like I'm going about my own business? With the most recent occurrence, I thought, okay, universe, I'm willing to look at this differently. I'm grateful to have this new way to begin discovering what's really going on in me. Throw in my divorce, shared parenting, remarriage, growing up with an alcoholic mom, my mom leaving when I was 3, and I've got plenty of fodder for worksheets. Kind regards, Joy. So if she's listening, thank you for writing, and if we can be of any support, if you've done some worksheets and you want to share, the call-in number is 646-200-4169.
Fabulous. Well, Joy, we share in your joy at moving your life forward, and as you move your life forward, engaging in the process of forgiveness. My take is that humans cannot survive long-term without forgiveness, because what happens is when we accumulate something that we don't want to deal with, when we put that energy into our structure, especially if we don't want to deal with it, we don't want to look at it, we deny and dissociate from it, and then it becomes a permanent fixture. And until one has the tools with which to remove that energy, sooner or later it's going to show up in one's life, it's going to show up in one's bloodline, and their whole lives become about whatever they're holding in that dissociated mind. And in the ancient Aramaic language, the word for the dissociated mind was the heart. You remember they said take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. So as long as one chooses to remain in a dissociated state, not deal with your own internal dynamics, then those internal dynamics run their lives, get passed to their children, their children's children, and their children, until somebody wakes up and says, you know, I noticed there's this pattern that keeps happening in my world. Why is this happening to me again? And then seeks out forgiveness, and forgiveness having nothing to do with letting others off the hook because there's a pattern in you that's playing out again, becomes the tool with which you literally crack open the dissociated mind. You literally find the pattern in you that creates the disordered state of chemistry in the cell, the distorted state of emotion, and the disordered state of mind that has you blaming everybody else for what's happening inside of you. And so once we realize that, it's absolutely awesome to step above that. And as you start to use your tools, and you're committed to it, the movement in your life will be rapid. It will be absolutely amazing. That doesn't mean you'll be done with everything in a week, a year, a lifetime. It does mean that the forward movement is absolutely awesome. And the tools take, more than one dip to get to understand. A lot of people, I'll hear from them and I'll tell them I'm doing this wise and stuff. Oh, well, I did that workshop. I did that 5 years ago. Like, having done it 5 years ago, now I'm finished. And I'll tell you that I created that workshop over a quarter of a century ago, have taught it probably at least an average of once a week, once every week and a half over the last 25 years. Sometimes I've taught it as often as 3 times in a day, and I will share with you that I'm still learning the principles behind the game. And many people say, well, why would that be necessary? Why would you bother with that? Well, let's take a look. The first time you sat down at your computer, you spent how long figuring out how to turn it on? You spent how long getting to open your word processing program? How many hours did you spend to get your email to send and receive? And what did it take to learn to get online? And how long did it take you to figure out how to store information for your favorites and your websites, et cetera? And, the average person has spent, if they're even the least bit proficient with computers, thousands of hours in learning to use them. And I will share with you that the computer that you spent thousands of hours learning to operate is a simpleton, an absolute simpleton compared to your human biocomputer that has stored in it hundreds of generations of thought, of feeling, of memory, of reality, of emotion, of distortion, and of dissociation. Your computer is a simpleton, and notice that you're still learning how to use it. And people say, Well, why would you have to keep engaging in learning how to use your biocomputer? Well, for one thing, at least your computer doesn't hide things from you, unless you happen to put something in with a password and forget the password. But we humans have spent 100 generations, 1,000 generations, specializing in hiding things from ourselves. How do we hide things from ourselves? When there's something going on in me and I say the words, you made me angry, you made me sad, you made me afraid, you made me this, then I just hid that from myself. And I don't have a clue what the password is. Guess what the password is? It's forgiveness. And guess what? You don't just get to clean up your own life. You get to clean up the lives of all the generations, because your life is built upon the generations, the gifts, the beauties, the wonders of your generations, and the downfalls, the misdeeds, and the insanities of your generations. And so it's going to take more than a day or two to get that into operation and to learn how to be proficient. And one of the skills that we're inviting people to learn is to learn how to decode the subtle energies that they've hidden from themselves. Because if we refuse to learn how to decode, if we refuse to take responsibility, and if we refuse to learn how to understand the subtle energies that are happening inside of us, then those subtle energies will set up a field and they will attract somebody with the decoder. And when people start decoding the unkindnesses you've done to yourself, it's not going to be very kind. It's not going to be very pretty. It's not going to be a lot of fun. And sadly, it tends to show up in the people that we're closest to, because when we get close to someone, especially a partner where we've had physical intimacy, we literally have exchanged genetics. They now have access to everything we've hidden from ourselves and vice versa, until one's willing to get out of the game of you made me and start to realize I've been here every one of the 1,000 times it's happened to me, and I need to be responsible and stop blaming and kicking at you. Then, this game's been going on for how long on planet Earth? So it's going to take a little time. And here we are, doing the work, developing the skills, and we're delighted to be here to support you. It takes time to digest. Digest slowly. Be patient. There's a lifetime of healing in this work, and it's literally an exciting opportunity to change the dynamics of your whole bloodline. There's nothing instant about it, and it takes courage to do the work. Those who live in impatience and frustration about everything that goes on in their lives are those who want everything the way I want it right now, are stuck in a thing called greed. And when they go into their rage and their little tantrums, every time everything doesn't just suit them, it's because of the greed of it all has to be my way right now. And, of course, if we live on top of 1,000 generations of it all has to be my way, there are huge emotional upheavals around that. So when one goes into, you observe the person who stands there and they're in such frustration that they scream at the top of their lungs some profanity. Why is that? That's because they're greedy. They want what they want when they want it, and it's got to be this way right now. And they've got 1,000 generations of frustration and rage under the surface that they haven't bothered to look at and don't want to look at and don't want to deal with. Want to change your bloodline? Want to change that dynamic if you recognize it? Then here's how you do it. You take responsibility. You learn a whole new language, and you learn to forgive. You learn to remove what never belonged. And as you do that, as Tim was just describing, you get to lay down and process some. You get to move those things out of your structure. Elimination increases. That fatigue sets in because as we're undoing those generations-old patterns, there's a literal major unwinding of energies within us. And it takes time to put those things back together. And so if you want something really meaningful to work with in your life, there's no instant meaningful in terms of learning to use your biocomputer and to change the direction of your generations. You remember the story of the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years. That was a story about us. The average person is about 40 before they start to wake up and realize that they're in a veritable desert of hostility and fear and they've lost their human lives. They've lost their way. How are we restored? You're restored one issue at a time, one piece at a time, until you befriend what we might call the super processor within, who then will go to work with and help you in doing that process. So any kind of instant meaningful is a fraud. It's an oxymoron. It doesn't work. And each time you engage the tools, I don't care if it's 1 year later, 2, 10, 20, 25. As I say, I invented that workshop 25 years ago, have done it thousands of times, and I'm still learning from it every time I teach it. Now, somebody could say, well, Michael, you're just a slow learner. Okay, well, maybe I am, but anyway. When you start looking at the complexities of your biocomputer, of your body's mind, there are layers and layers and levels of the work that you will come to understand in deeper and deeper ways. There'll be more and more meaningful peak experiences with each passing year of dedicated engagement. And it's going to take engagement. It's going to take participation. Kim, how's that fit for you? What's your thought on that one? You've been working with people for the last 6 years in Crystal Lake with a support group and I got to play with a number of those awesome folks that you've been teaching and training and learning with for the last 6 years. How does that all strike you?
Well, I think the most powerful thing is that even though I've seen each of your lectures 2 or 3 times a year for the last 5 years, I'm still struck with different discoveries about myself and about the material every night, every Tuesday night when we go through this stuff. And I understand people's reluctance to appreciate that. I mean, I on a regular basis, I have people questioning me, asking me, why are you doing this? And why are you doing this and not getting paid for it? And, you know, what do you get out of this? I mean, how many times can you watch the same video or the same lecture by someone and get anything new out of it? Well, I think the answer I would have last year would be different than the answer this year. But this year my answer would be that because in the ancient Aramaic they understood that the words that were being spoken didn't have meaning, but that meaning was carried in the mind of the person who heard the words. So that when someone was teaching back then, they understood that as they gave one lesson or told one parable, if there were 8 people listening, there would be 8 different levels of meaning taken from their story. And what I've come to understand at deeper and deeper levels is that over the past 5 years of running this group and my 6 years of doing this work is that I have come to understand myself, the way my mind works, at an entirely different level than I did even 2 or 3 years ago. And I expect that the more I keep working with it, the more deeply I'm going to understand and be able to tap into things like intuition and to be able to develop that spiritual faculty of choice and will. And these are not things that had happened to me overnight when I first got introduced to the material. Overnight when I first got introduced to the material, I was thrilled because there was something I could use in the moment to help resolve a negative feeling. What I'm doing now at deeper and deeper levels is building resilience and flexibility and patience and a greater ability to tap into my awareness of my source's love, and it just keeps growing. So I like what Guy Finley says about learning. He says, in order to learn anything, I must first make myself subordinate to that from which I would learn. I can't think I know and approach a situation and learn anything new from that situation. I must approach a situation And if it has any depth to what it has to offer me, I must approach it again and again and again, and I must do it with the assumption that what I currently think I know is either only partially true or completely false. And if I don't have those two things, the repetition and that perspective of thinking that what I already know is only partially true or false, I can't learn anything new. If I go into a situation believing I know what I know, I'm going to come out the same way, unchanged. If I go in open, I come out different. I come out with new brain cells, as you say.
Well, and, when Yeshua says you've got to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, of course, he's talking about building those brain cells. And people who won't do their work or will only do it minimally want to come back to the trough, and they bring the same old mind, and they expect things are going to be different. And, as far as Yeshua's teachings, we still don't know what we don't know from it, but what we do know is absolutely awesome. And if you apply them, then each time you bring a new mind to the trough, and there's a whole different food supply there. I love one of the stories that Guy Finley tells about the fellow who's getting ready to go on a 6-month journey, and he goes by his friend's new business to say hello, and his friend has just put up a big new sign for his wooden bench shop where he's going to build wooden benches. And, he says, good luck on your business venture, and off he goes. I'll see you in 6 months. And 6 months later he comes back and he stops by his friend's business, and there's no longer a sign about his wooden bench business. And now it's a whole woodworking shop. So he goes in and he says, gee, that looks good. What happened? He said, well, guy says, I opened that business building wooden benches, and things just didn't go very well. I found out I didn't know anything about building wooden benches and working with wood. And the guy kind of stands back and takes a deep breath. He says, well, why are you now operating a woodworking shop? He said, well, I just thought I'd try again and hope things would be different. And you watch people who go back to a relationship with no new skills, no new willingness, and certainly not the willingness to be responsible when their deeper stuff comes up. And they're kind of like, well, I want to go back and I hope things will be different, but they're not going to be different. And that worksheet process is something that's just so important to engage. And when one engages the forgiveness process from the Aramaic, and again, that's on our website if you just tap into the show, on the right-hand side under at www.whyagain.com, you'll see a link that says download worksheets, and you'll find the first 4 links will tap you into the whole forgiveness process. But sometimes people will lose their train of thought as they're doing a worksheet or go into confusion, and that means that they're opening up a part of their minds that holds something that doesn't belong there. And so one doesn't grasp the whole set of principles in one sitting or one reading or one listening. And the same with the worksheet. If one loses track of a step in the worksheet, you do what you do until you can obtain a deeper understanding. And as you obtain that deeper understanding, you go from level to level, layer to layer. And that tends to be the problem. So that's where we tend to go. Your thoughts on that, Tim?
Well, it's powerful if you can get yourself to make a commitment to apply the tools. My thought is that so many people, as you said, say, oh, I heard that lecture 5 years ago. But if I heard of a tool 5 years ago and never applied it in my life, I'm no different now than I was 5 years ago relative to that tool. And there were several people who were motivated by your friend Ari, who came to the workshops and talked about how he made a commitment to do 5 worksheets a day for 40 days. And at the end of the workshop series on Saturday, he was there for the breathing, and he said to me that he really had a whole different experience this week in the workshops he was able to attend, because he understood things at a whole different level. Some things got in, he understood different things about himself, and he had to attribute that to the fact that he had just completed 5 worksheets a day for 40 days. So it's really about what you talked about in your introduction, finding out what I've hidden from myself, finding out how my brain, thinking that it was protecting me, has locked things down into my unconscious and stored them in my body's system energetically with the false assumption that it was protecting me. And inadvertently, it has then sown the seeds for all of my disease, physical, mental, and emotional. And it's my job, from a higher level of awareness than that automatic defense mechanism, than that defense mechanism of denial and suppression, it's my job to come at it from a higher level of awareness and dig in and uncover all of those things that I've hidden from myself about my thoughts, my judgments, my fears. And as I do that, I get to put them down. I get to quit carrying them around with me, energetically, physically, emotionally, and it's a process that needs, a conscious application of tools like the ones you offer, and it yields results that you just can't explain until you've had them, until you've been there. You can just throw some words at it to try and indicate, I feel lighter, I'm more flexible, I'm more patient, I'm less irritable, I have less anger. But people don't really understand what that means until they step into it for themselves, because, there are people who walk around with a smile pasted on their face trying to act as though everything is all right, and they're still doing the denial and suppression routine. If you go in and actually face what you've hidden from yourself and dismantle it and have a vigilance about it, it pays rewards and dividends that you just can't talk about with words.
That's for sure. The language is so inadequate to describe what's actually happening. If we listen to the physicists, they tell us, right from the get-go, matter doesn't exist, and yet we believe we live in a whole material world. If you work from the theoretical framework that you live in a material world, you have a set of beliefs that are somewhere off in space that have nothing to do with what's actually going on. And it's pretty hard to actually live in a world that you don't know anything about. And so one of the goals of this work is to create a theoretical framework from which to view life differently and to let go of some of the generational beliefs that just aren't true. And certainly there's going to be confusion as a part of the process of doing that. We're going to come up the other side and get to move through some things that just, aren't true, aren't accurate. And the letting go of those things is a major challenge for sure. Jeanie, any callers, any comments on this this conversation, Woody?
Okay, hold on a second. I was just reading another chat. Joe's out there, and he just says, amen to Tim, well put. Sounds like Einstein. I first met Michael 20 years ago, and today it's as new as it was then. So, and on the phone, there's several people listening, but nobody's got their hands up. So,
well, I just wanted to say it was certainly a powerful and productive set of workshops. We had some people calling me, and as you mentioned, Michael, wanted to get more as soon as they could, including driving down to Naperville last night. So there were people who had no exposure to the work at all prior to your coming, who, for whatever reason, whether it was my recommendation or the Spirit moved them, they came in and attended either 5 of 5 or 4 out of 5 during the week, and a couple of those people even came to the still point breathing. So it can be done. You can come at this with no prior exposure and make great progress in a very short period of time. It's one of those paradoxes of how we say it's going to take a long time and there's a lot of work to do, but at the same time, you can begin to see concrete benefits and changes in your life in a very short period of time. So,
yeah, actually, there will be people who will see those concrete changes, the emotional changes, even physical changes, almost instantly. And once you start tapping into the truth of the way things go, which doesn't mean you fully understand at this point, it is a process. And the underlying process is so simple to engage in, although at first it appears complex, because one of the games of what we call the non-being mind is to keep truth complex. And so to a complex mind, truth is going to be complex. And to a simplified mind, truth is going to be simple. Confusion is the first line of defense of the non-being mind. And when one engages fully in the work, what happens is they undo the confusion and they start to step into a new level of understanding. And it takes courage to do that. You know, the body's mind tends to resist change because right now most everybody's in their settled little place of, well, I at least have somebody to blame for what's going on in my life, and it's all their fault. And if you upset the apple cart and start telling me that it's about me and then what's going on inside of me, what happens is my fear, my weakness, my inertia, all of that comes to the surface, and something new threatens the sense of false power in the comfort zone. And I certainly acknowledge those folks who showed up last week out in Cary because there were some pretty major things going on for several folks who just, said, okay, I'm ready to be intimidated. I'm ready to look at the existing structures in my mind. Okay, I've got it all settled out that my spouse is a problem in my life, and if they just change, everything would be wonderful. And now you just upset the apple cart. It threatens the heck out of me for you to tell me that my false power and this comfort I've got in knowing that it's all their fault is all a fraud, it's all a lie, that this is all mine. But the courage of people to look at that and start to go, and certainly that kind of change intimidates existing structures, right up to influencing, every level of existence, wealth, power, influence. It's a threat to everything. And it's the most awesome gift that you could possibly give yourself. There's a fellow back in 1689, John Locke, who's an English philosopher, and he says there are very few lovers of truth for truth's sake, even amongst those who persuade themselves that they are so. Not easy. The bureaucratic mind, the mind that's established out of this state of non-being, says we must maintain this established order. Doesn't matter how much of a mistake it is, we've got to keep it. And it rationalizes its insanity with lies. And we define in this work, for those who are not familiar with it yet, we define insanity as any mind that operates without a human life behind it. What's a human life? Well, hold a newborn child, you know exactly what human life is. It is the absolute active presence of love. If you're operating without a human life, then you're in trouble. And most of the world is operating through hostility, fear, grief, pain, drama, trauma, terror, threat, all of those things. None of those things have anything to do with the truth of the world that the Creator created for us. And most people try to convince themselves that its falsehoods, be they about themselves or others, are the truth. And it cloaks its lies in unnecessary secrets. And it exists then in a state of blockage of truth, and it can't see its involvement in its own challenges. And there's only one antidote to that dilemma. And you can tell if you are living in that dilemma. Do you have any form of hostility or fear? If you do, then you're in the dilemma that we're just describing. Love of truth will take you through it. However, you're going to get to look at everything unlike a true human life. on your journey there. And so there are lots of, detours and opportunities in that, but why people would ask the question, why is there a weakness in a mind that's out of alignment with truth? Because the mind that's out of alignment with truth blocks what it's doing to itself. And so in its unconscious way, it attacks itself, but then always projects the attack and is sure that somebody else attacked it. And what happens is, what someone does when that is confronted is they resort to bullying or leaving. Well, then I'm out of here. I'm just not going to have anything to do with this. Because all of a sudden, the false sense of power and control that comes from the lie is all of a sudden threatened. And so it'll turn to bullying, separation, or just plain flat out, I'm leaving, I'm out of here, because all of a sudden I don't feel settled in my beliefs, and my beliefs are so tenuous I cannot possibly stand to have them questioned. That's because they're a lie. If you can't stand to have your beliefs questioned, they're a lie. They're not true. And weakness masquerades as strength by bullying, separating, and leaving. And once you realize that the belief system is just a platform from which you view the world, and that any theory or belief is provable, quote unquote, from within its own errors, it breaks down where its foundation is flawed. And guess how you can tell if a belief system is flawed? Is there any form of fear in it? Is it based in fear? Has it been promoted through fear? Has threat been used? If so, then it's based in an absolute lie. And if we buy into that lie because we live in a world of resonance, we'll draw somebody to play that out with us. And once one actually chooses to tap into love of truth, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. Maybe this is about me. Then the bullying, the leaving, the separation disappears, and one comes forward willing to be supported in the healing process. There's an awesome, if you're new to the show, if you go to the website whyagain.com, W-H-Y, again.com, on the right-hand side, download worksheets. The third link is an absolutely awesome show that we did with this young lady named Lynn, who was so courageous and so willing and so teachable. And as you say, Tim, somebody who thinks they already know it all, they're not teachable. No, somebody who's been introduced to this work 5 minutes later can tell me all about it and how it should be done. Or 5 years later, they know it all already, far beyond what I know in doing it for 40 years. Of course, if you look at their hostility and fear, their blustering and their rage and their terror, that's all a front. It's all a fraud. And so the idea is to be willing to be coachable, to be teachable. Very few people can escape their own insanity on their own. When they depart, they simply go into another level of their own insanity. And they feel secure there because they've got this false sense of power based in the lie. So the belief system provides a platform, and if the platform's weak, don't threaten it or you're in big trouble. And so what we're looking to do is to give people a set of tools to move forward to new platforms, to new levels of understanding that are really, truly based in truth. If one does not love truth, the fault at the root of one's problems is absolutely invisible, and corrective action is impossible. How can you tell if somebody's in that blockage of truth and doesn't love truth? Do they go into hostility or fear when confronted? Hostility or fear is a sure sign that you don't know what you think you know. And there's work to be done, and that's just part of the process. So, and of course the person who doesn't love truth, who wants to blame everybody else and keeps their own faults hidden, will proclaim their innocent victim status. They'll have somebody to talk to them about how, when they did this to me and what they did to me and it was so terrible. They've got to have someone to blame, and by doing so, they remain in their own errors, and their errors are totally and completely invisible to them because they call their error truth. The way that one blocks truth is by calling their error truth. How can you tell if your truth is an error? Is there some form of hostility or fear behind it? That's such a huge piece of learning to get a hold of, to recognize that. So the solution to the dilemma is in the work of the ancient Aramaic forgiveness. How do you change the content of your own mind? And, of course, most people don't feel like their minds need to be changed to everybody else's. So we're here to support all of us in getting to the next level. I don't know anybody that's arrived, and some people may, Jim and I were talking the other day, and there's a friend who had written about how, well, if you haven't arrived in 6 years, if you haven't arrived in 30 years, well, then obviously there's something wrong with you. Well, I don't know anybody who's worked with computers for 6 years and says, well, now I know it all. There's no more work I need to do to understand computers or any of it. I don't know anybody that would live there. And this immensely more complex biocomputer, people say, well, if you haven't got it together in 6 years, then, there's obviously something wrong with you. Or there's something wrong with what you're studying. No, it's a set of skills that you develop over time. So the forgiveness process is one of the core tools that is the solution to the dilemma.
One of the things that came up for me again on Thursday, you do the codependent to interdependence, and you do the worksheet where you list everybody that's ever offended you, and then what they did to offend you, and what your punishment thought is for them, and then what your advice is for them. Right. And then the last column is that you write how I'm going to apply my advice to the other person in my life. And it's been sinking in at different levels for me how powerful that is, that it's all an inside job. And if I get upset about anything anybody else is doing, the only reason I could possibly be upset about that is because I have judgments I'm holding against myself for doing something similar. And I have not dismantled those judgments about myself in any meaningful way. And that's what I'm seeing as anger at them. And we had several people who were working during the extended process on Saturday in the still point breathing who came face-to-face with that at different levels. And it just, as you talk about, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. In the community and in the space of these people being held in love, but simply being very honest about their anger and their frustration and their hurt, I was able to see at new levels some of the things that I've been judging and holding against others that are really all about me. And the more different ways you can, you talk about this in one of your 4-hour Why Again workshops. If you're trying to understand something new and complex, the more different ways and different angles and perspectives you can hear it from, the faster it'll sink in and have different, meaning at different levels. So one of the different ways for me is, instead of just doing my own worksheets, but being around other people who are telling their story honestly and coming face-to-face with their hidden traumas in their life, and that helps me see into me. So that was one of the big, powerful points for me on combining things that happened on Thursday night with the still point breathing and the discussions around that, the mind shifter that was coming up on Saturday.
Well, it was, cool that worksheet. There's an assignment we give to people as a homework assignment, and some people just kind of laugh it off. But what we invite people to do is to take their advice and write a letter to each person in their lives about how they're going to apply that advice to themselves. And Ari was sharing that for the first time, and of course he's done that codependence workshop many times over the years in the intensives at Heartland, but for the first time on Thursday night when I gave that assignment, he went home, he had the day to himself on Friday, and he wrote all of those letters, and that was part of his breakthrough in the still point breathing on Saturday. And it was really awesome to watch what he got a hold of and what changed. I mean, major physical changes. And, you know, there's a movie, it's kind of a heavy-duty movie. It's a little bit strange, but there's a character in it. The movie's called Angel Heart, and there's a character in it named Louis Cypher. And he says this, and it's just an amazing quote. He says, "No matter how cleverly you sneak up on a mirror, your reflection always looks you right in the eye." You know, it's just, I thought that was a pretty cool quote to have put into that film. Because what one is breaking down when one decides, okay, I want to live in truth, is they have to break down their belief systems. You know, for instance, if someone has a belief system in being an innocent victim, and they start to look at that, it's accompanied by major crisis because so much of their lives ride on the belief that they're a victim. You know, somebody who had marriage 1, marriage 2, relationship 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and they've always been a victim. Go back to mom, go back to dad. They were a victim, you know, there were nasty things said, blah, blah, blah. To actually start to confront that and say, I'm not an innocent victim. I'm participating in this, and of course that's the power of that particular exercise in the codependence workshop. So much of their lives ride on the belief that they're an innocent victim that when they get into a relationship where all of a sudden there's no victimization, they have to make it up. There's another cool movie that we often show at Heartland that's worth watching in this regard, and it's called, let me get my brain to it. Inventing the Abbots. And it's a story about two young men who are raised in a town where their father has died, and they believe that his business partner stole the business from him. And the one young man is very resentful toward this particular family and, you know, really takes advantage and all kinds of projections. But anyway, toward the end of the film, the mother of this young man says to the brother who didn't play the game, you know, didn't live in the resentment toward this family that was wealthy while they were kind of poor, she says to him, you know, you realize your brother, if there had been no Abbots in town, would have had to invent the Abbots. Of course, that's the name of the family that has the money. They'd had to invent it. And people who hold victimhood at the root of their minds, 1,000 generations, lifetimes and lifetimes of generations that have been abused and used and, you know, terrified, terrorized, come into a world where they've created the same patterns over and over. If they go into a relationship where there's actual nurturing, sooner or later, those brain cells are going to fire, and when hostility or fear comes up, they'll tell themselves the lie that now they're being victimized. They'll make up a literal whole picture that their mind will show them about how they're being victimized. Fragile beliefs make people fragile. They're vulnerable, and they're prone to self-inflicted suffering. And it's interesting that humans are the only creatures on the planet that impose suffering on themselves and others over their beliefs. It's just such an interesting dynamic, how people do that. And most human suffering started out as a false belief, and historically, I mean, if you look back, millions have been murdered to protect false beliefs, and those beliefs are called doctrine and dogma. Millions. You look back in the history of the church, and millions have been murdered in order to keep those false beliefs going. Don't you dare challenge the authority who knows it all. And you know, does it seem strange to someone or anyone that doctrines that say they're based in love have been the cause of millions being murdered? And one who professes to believe in those doctrines is willing to pick up weapons and kill people, even today, and that our culture is so bizarre and off the wall that we make heroes out of those people who go totally and completely against what the one they say they follow proclaimed. And, there's blocks to truth. Strikes again. And if the mind doesn't love truth more than its own opinions, it can't see its errors because it calls its errors truth. It's invisible. It's impossible. And a mind that is so occupied has no room for truth to enter, and so can't question its beliefs, because to do so would elevate its stress to unacceptable levels. A mind that is stressed by the simple appearance of anything that conflicts with its cherished opinions, its sacred cows, is so enraged or so terrified it has to run in order not to have to deal with internalized stress. And what will tend to happen is a mind that's so stressed will have to make up stories and attack and destroy in order to keep its own weakness hidden, if from no one but itself, and to protect itself from having to confront the stresses of the things that it holds as false. And once again, if we look at the underlying energy of the universe, it's the stuff called love. Nothing based in fear applies. It just isn't true. So that's it's a courageous thing for somebody to step in and do the work. It is awesome. It was just fabulous last week, especially there were a couple of people there who had some obviously very deep traumas, and the courage with which they faced them and came forward smiling and moving through was really pretty cool. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I would like to add a thanks to everybody who showed up and make last week a resounding success, in my opinion, if for no other reason than the power of the work that some people did. And as you say, the intensity of the pain and trauma that people were willing to face, or at least push aside so they could get into those seminars and workshops and have access to the tools. It was truly humbling.
Yeah, it was pretty fabulous, wasn't it?
Yep.
And we're going to do some more of it this week, I think. We're working on it. We'll see how it all just happens to unfold and move forward. So we'll be posting to the website as soon as we set something up and get a venue together. If anyone does have access to a venue in the Naperville area, somewhere between Naperville and Cary, Illinois, it would be awesome to hear from you and see what we can set up. Other than that, for those who might be ready to take their work to the next level, we're going to do an intuitive development intensive starting on September the 16th. It'll be a 9-day workshop at Heartland. And in that 9-day, we'll be doing, of course, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Why is this happening to me again? And the forgiveness process tends to do is to move the noise out of the mind. And when it's out of the mind, then we get to hear on new levels. So anyone who's ready to do that, and we'll be doing MindShifters and still point breathing. And then several days we'll be doing a practicum on just getting access to information directly from the actual world rather than through the body's mind and through the past, which always filters and interprets things. And so getting into the actuality of life will be what we'll be working on in that intuitive development. So if anybody wants to jump, we would absolutely love to have you with us, and we certainly support you in putting the tools to work in your life and creating the best year yet of your eternal life. Blessings. Bring a friend tomorrow to the show.
Thank you for listening to MindShifters Radio with the For-giveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie, who present the internal Aramaic process of forgiveness. Michael and Jeanie are here every Monday through Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Earth Angels Radio. For more on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. That's www.whyag RAIN.com.